Salut YouTube, welcome back to the Not Even French channel. Today I'm going to be reacting to and explaining some of your assumptions about French people. So if you guys don't know, I've already done part 1 of this series. I'll link it down below. I did another video on it, but basically I asked you guys on Instagram what your assumptions were about French people, and I got some hilarious responses that I'm going to react to and explain here in this video. But we've got loads of assumptions to get through, so without further ado, let's jump right into them. Okay, so the first assumption about French people is that they cannot pronounce the letter H and that it embarrasses them. They've got a thick French accent. It's true that they struggle with the letter H, so they would say thank you instead of thank you, hello instead of hello, how are you instead of how are you, and sometimes they even add H's to things. So they'll say to be honest, or like I'm very angry, to say I'm very angry kind of thing. So yeah, that can happen, but I don't know if it actually embarrasses them or if they're just like, meh, we've got the sexiest accent in the world. Okay, I've had lots and lots of assumptions coming in next, which is all around, okay, the French are snobby, they're arrogant, they're rude, they judge people a lot, all of this kind of stuff. So I'm going to try my best to tackle this, the rude things. A lot of things that French people do can be misinterpreted because their version of being polite may be being more distant and reserved than you think, and that kind of thing. And I did my very first video on this channel actually was on this topic, and I will link it down below. So it's called Are French People Rude? And I go into it in a lot of detail. Now, in terms of snobby and arrogant, this is tricky because, you know, the French people do strive to be kind of cultured and intellectual, so you've got that playing into the equation as well around are they snobby or not, or arrogant, you know. And it's very much about how much you know, and being wealthy and having money doesn't mean anything if you don't have a lot of culture and general knowledge, and you don't know about art, and you don't know about this kind of thing. So yeah, there definitely is something like a quest for knowledge, and this can maybe then make them come across a little bit as know-it-alls. There's also a lot of things in France which is like, oh, this is the best way to do it. So in terms of the French food, the way people eat, right, there's a huge thing. The French people eat a certain way. They eat 3 times per day. If you're ever going to snack, it will be in the afternoon for the goûter. But you know, there's very strict rules around eating in France, right? And if you ever try to tell them like, oh, you know, apparently it's better to eat 6 small meals a day or something, they will shoot you down, and they'll be like, no way, you know. So there is also this kind of sense of like they know best, which I think can be interpreted as well as being a bit arrogant. And of course their whole education system is around defending their point of view. So if you try and come at them with a different perspective, they will defend their point of view and debate and argue for their convictions and their perspective until they're blue in the face. And often what happens, other cultures give up. They're like, okay, you know, too hard, I don't want to engage in this debate. But the French person, it doesn't mean they weren't listening to you, and it doesn't mean they didn't think your arguments were valid, but they've kind of been taught to really defend their convictions. And sometimes it may come across again as that they're really arguing, they're not willing to hear other people's points of views, and they know everything. Now, in terms of being judgmental, I mean, to be honest, I did come across a lot of judgmental and bitchy, especially girls, sorry to say it, in Paris, sorry to be a bit cliche, who really would be quite mean and always gossiping about strangers they didn't even know, and like looking at people that walked in the room and judging what people were wearing and that kind of thing. But, you know, I never really saw that in the regions, like, you know, friends in Marseille and that kind of thing. Well, like a lot less. Yeah, I don't know, it depends. I guess it depends who you are and like what kind of people you're talking about. I think that kind of stuff exists everywhere. Now, another assumption that was coming through that I would get quite a lot was that they eat fatty food or rich food or like creamy food, or like basically they eat whatever they want and stay effortlessly thin. I would say it's not really effortless if you think about it. If you see how thin people are in Paris compared to the regions, how like normal French people versus Paris, Parisians are obviously making an effort, you know. They're obviously a bit more restrictive, a lot more restrictive. They're quite harsh on themselves. If they have a cheap meal or if they overindulge, they'll definitely like make up for it the next day and eat less and really watch themselves. So it's not effortless. But yeah, I was surprised that in general the French do eat quite rich food. Like there's a lot of meat and creamy sauces, a lot of butter and that kind of thing. But I think what helps them is that they use a lot of whole foods and a lot of produce and stuff that's, you know, hasn't really been transformed. So you don't see any like fake cheese and like, you know, things coming in a lot of plastic packaging and that kind of thing. So I think that's quite a good thing, and that helps as well as the fact that when they eat is really huge. So they're not big snackers, and they definitely don't eat a lot of junk food and that kind of thing. I've actually done an entire video on the French Parisian diet stuff, so I'll link that down below if you want to go into more detail about what their actual diet entails. Oh, and I've actually done a whole video on why French people don't get fat before I forget, so I'll put that down below as well. Now, I got a lot of assumptions coming through that they're very like cold or reserved or distant and that kind of thing, but are very sweet and loyal once you get to know them, and this is absolutely true. So I've talked about this before, but the French are coconuts. So that means that they've got a hard outer shell, but once you get into it, the coconut insides, I guess, they're very warm and very welcoming and very loyal, and you have a friend for life. And I would also just say as well that different things make French people tick. So what might get them really worked up and engaged and really into a, you know, getting into a conversation would maybe be more like politics or something like that, or like a change in policy, or yeah, things about like your rights, things about taxes, that kind of thing. I mean, there's certain topics that you can touch on that will get French people, I guess, riled up, that are just maybe a little bit different to what you're used to. I got a weird assumption coming through saying I have to know about the teeth flossing thing. Is it true that French people don't floss? So for me, my French husband definitely flosses. He even has one of those like little stick brush things and goes really in there every single day. So I think they floss, but if they don't, it may be something to do with the fact that they have free dental care, so that they can go to the dentist and get professional cleans and stuff so often that maybe they see, I don't know, there's less point, even though of course you should be flossing every day. I don't know, are you French? Do you floss? Let me know. I'll put a poll up here actually. You guys can answer that. If you're French, do you floss or not? Let's see. This assumption cracked me up. The French don't like physical contact. Like French people who greet strangers by kissing them, la bise, and are happy to like make out in public and in parks and the gardens, on the metro. I think that physical contact is just fine. Okay, so the next ones were all around, I guess, like casual dress. The French never look sloppy, they're never wearing spandex out in public, they're never wearing leggings, this kind of stuff. So this is true in general. So the French are always like tidy and quite well presented, and there's a serious lack you see my preference, of track pants, onesies, hoodies, like oversized hoodies, like all of this kind of stuff. Just slobbing around at home is definitely less done. Even when you're like back home in your family home, like if you wake up on Sunday, you would get dressed before going downstairs, which I find crazy, because for me it's like, let's just hang out in our PJs all day kind of thing. I notice like little events like family Christmases and stuff like that, like all of the guys will be wearing nice shirts, almost like a day at work, do you know what I mean? Like a nice little tidy shirt and stuff. And I feel like their casual is more like business casual kind of thing. Another assumption about the food, so that they eat on a strict schedule depending on your area of the world, and they never eat junk food. Their willpower is unmatchable, and this is just a big fat yes. So rare. I think it's because they eat properly, and they do eat on the strict schedule, so they know when they eat and they know how much to eat, and it's very consistent. And so they're eating like full filling meals at regular times. And so yeah, they're not having like the afternoon munchies, chippies or chocolate bars and that kind of stuff. I very rarely see French people drinking like fizzy drink, Coke, and just snacking on crap really. Yeah, they do have amazing willpower, but I think it's not even willpower, because they don't even want it, they don't even crave it. My French husband doesn't like sweets, doesn't like fizzy drink, has eaten McDonald's once or twice in his entire life, doesn't like it, so he doesn't even want it, which is kind of cool. This assumption is like, of course, they enjoy baguettes and they eat a lot of cheese. So this is definitely not a stereotype, not a cliche. There's a lot of baguette eating, so morning, lunchtime and dinner, all prime opportunities to eat baguette, definitely. It's such a standard part of a meal in France. And yes, you can only get the smelly, runny, unpasteurized cheeses like you can in France, and they love them, and there's just something about the French cheese that you cannot find anywhere else. This assumption was kind of random, but they have a lot of dents and scratches on their car. I don't know if I noticed that in particular. I'm not very good with cars. I don't like look at cars and notice them because I'm not interested in them as such, but I would say probably because the way French people park blew my mind. They're honestly the most skilled parkers in the world. But what they do is they can actually touch the back of the like the front of the other car. Like they'll reverse in and they'll actually and kind of go and like actually touch the other car to get in, and that's done. And that's kind of okay. You're like, obviously you're not going to smash it, but to touch other people's car, oh my gosh, if that happened in New Zealand, whew, not okay. Now, I also have the stereotype the French are lazy and unproductive, and I would say that this is absolutely false. They just structure their work differently. So they take more vacations, yes, that's true, and they have the right to take more, so that's great, like good for them. They didn't get that by being lazy though, they fought for it, a lot of protesting, a lot of strikes and everything. But I would say in general in Paris, definitely we worked really long hours, definitely more than the 35-hour cliche, but we did kind of get compensated more holiday time kind of thing. But I wouldn't say that they're lazy and unproductive. In fact, France is the world's 7th largest economy, and against any measure of productivity, they're always up there with Germany, the UK, and that kind of thing. What I would say is that the French do value work-life balance more than the US, Australia, New Zealand, maybe even the UK, I would say. So they put family first and they put life first. They don't live to work in general. Cool guys, so I hope you enjoyed this round of assumptions. I had a lot of fun filming this video. Let me know if you have any assumptions about French people down below, or which of these surprised you the most. And otherwise, I will see you guys next time on the Not Even French channel. Bisous and à bientôt!